All right, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Unlock the Power of Mainframe Data with Snowflake and PropelZ. All right, so I'm Dustin Froyum. I am one of the co-founders of VirtualZ, and today I have Vince, who you heard, who's our Chief Technology Officer and co-founder as well. So today, like I said, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Snowflake. I kind of title's a little misleading because we are going to talk about a use case or two for Lozen in regards to Snowflake as well. So first, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges with classic ETL models to get mainframe data out to your AI, BI, data lakes, those types of things. So in historic traditional models, right, this can be fairly costly and take precious mainframe general processing resources, whether those are kind of homegrown solutions or, some of the other somewhat commercially available ETL solutions on the market. But those solutions, whether they're the homegrown or the commercially available, they take a lot of scarce labor resources to implement and maintain. And so, those are big considerations as to how you think about it, efficiently sharing data with your mainframe to your cloud and distributed platforms. The other thing, because of, those architectures, you can lack some agility. And so you have can take quite a bit of time to implement and get the data configured and through those legacy processes. I don't know, Vince, you and I we had a conversation with a customer. They were waiting, 4 to 6 weeks every time there was a change to a file. And we were just talking to them about, they kept asking us, right? Well, how long does it take through PropelZ? How long? We're like, well, it's really automated and instantaneous, and they really couldn't believe us. And they're coming from that perspective, right? If again, lots of people working on it for 4 to 6 weeks, interpret the data, get it configured, push it through their legacy process.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
go ahead,
that's
Vince.
uncommon. I don't think that's at all uncommon. I
Yeah.
put myself in their shoes, and somebody hands me, let's say a mainframe VSAM file, and inside that file are, God knows what data formats and all the complicated things, mainframe floating point numbers and packed decimal, and deciphering that and turning that into an ETL application, sure, it could take you weeks of work to do it if you didn't have a tool like our products give you. So yeah, definitely sympathize with them.
Yeah, I'm look forward to hearing you talk about how we solve that.
Yeah.
Those architectures can be fragile, require lots of ongoing maintenance. Again, just a kind of anecdote about a customer experience that Vince, you and I were talking with that customer about. Had tried to implement an event-based architecture, took a lot of resources, spent 2 years, and ultimately abandoned it for something we can implement in a day or two, and get really fast time to value. And then if you're taking it from a lot of different resources and locations, right, that can be hard to aggregate that data, especially if you're going to multiple targets too. So that's something we'll talk about and how we address that. And then, we really believe in maintaining mainframe security controls. And so it's another thing you can lose depending on your particular use case and how you want to share and access that data. And so we have some dedication to that and how we do that and in some particular implementations. So let's just talk a little bit about PropelZ. Vince, you want to just kind of talk us through the basic architecture and approach we have to start?
Yeah. So PropelZ is a self-contained application that you run on ZOS. Not a lot of prerequisites. There's no CICS, there's no MQ, there's none of that stuff. Just run PropelZ. It accesses your data and connects to really whatever you configure it to connect to. I always think of PropelZ as kind of three stages. There's an input stage, a transformation stage, and an output stage. The input stage typically is going to be things like VSAM files. Could be sequential files, could be just about any data you have on the mainframe. And there are even cases where the data is not a file. It's something like ZOS, SMF accounting data, or console message traffic that we can access through PropelZ. The transformation is the part that I mentioned before. It's how do I understand the structure of this data? And the transformation engine we use in PropelZ, is based on really simple approach. You have things like let's say COBOL metadata that describes what those file records look like. You want to just be able to point to that and kind of use whatever you've got. So it's not just that these are mainframe files; it's that the content tends to be what I described a couple of minutes ago. They can have they certainly can have text fields, they can have binary fields, they can have packed decimal fields, floating point, all sorts of different things, all packed together into a single record. So the metadata that we use, which again is nothing more than a COBOL copybook most of the time, allows us to understand that file, field by field. And what that means is when we go to the target, it's not just here's a data bit for bit in a big blob format. I mean, we can do that if you need that for some reason. But much more likely, what we're going to do is use the metadata to break that down into columns. So name and address and social security number and all the other columns you might have in there. And then when we go to whatever target we want, we're creating rows and columns, let's say in a relational database that are all broken out, formatted correctly based on the type of data that you start with. So you see a table, not just a blob of of information there. On the output side, typically we're using JDBC for that, and the reason we do that is that gives us access to probably about 100 different types of databases. We supply 5, actually a little bit more than 5 in the box that are kind of certified, ready to go. Those are, MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, Snowflake, and Oracle are the kind of 5 that come, certified, ready to go. No reason it can't be any other database that has a JDBC interface. So, you want to go to, I don't know, Ingress or DB2 on a Linux system, or really fill in the blank, just about any type of database can be plugged in there. And it doesn't require code, it's just configuration. Here's the JDBC driver I want you to use. And then we also give you a way to tailor the actual queries that come through. One of the other really unique things that we do is that, sure, we can go through an entire data set and create a table in the database, but we can also do incremental processing. If you have a big giant, let's say a VSAM file, maybe it's, I don't know, terabyte of data, maybe you don't want to go through that file every record over and over again. Maybe what you want to do is do that once and then run PropelZ once in a while. Let's say, I don't know, every hour or something like that. And what you want us to do is figure out which of the records have been updated, what records have been changed, what records have been inserted. We absolutely can work in that mode too. And then what you have is nearly real time, it's as close to real time as you want it to be. If you need it to run every 5 seconds and do that scan, you can do that. Once a day might be enough in other cases, totally up to you. And the advantage here is, a lot of customers try what I'll call the change data capture approach here. There are products that compete with us that hook into VSAM, and every time they see an update to a record, they'll write that to a target database in the cloud. The problem with that is it's a complicated, fragile approach. Dusty and I met with a customer that had spent close to 2 years trying to make this work. And between the overheads, the operational changes, they had to, for instance, define ZOS log streams for all of the data sets they wanted to monitor. I mean, they actually gave up. It was not doable in their environment. With PropelZ, you have none of that. With PropelZ, first of all, what we do is completely asynchronous. It doesn't slow anything down. It's running completely outside of any process that might actually be updating the file. So if you're trying to update that file a million times a second in let's say Kix transactions, we don't insert any code in that path. All we're doing is kind of following along asynchronously and saying, okay, you added these records, changed these records, deleted these records. Let's keep everything in sync. So because of that, it's a much simpler approach that can kind of give you that synchronization between mainframe files and cloud databases without that overhead of change data capture in the middle. The other thing too is that because our architecture is to do everything on the mainframe, there's no other platforms or tiers involved. We talk to your target database directly, and we do it with protocols that are optimized for database traffic. And what that means is we get very high throughput. Some of our competitors use this idea of, take the mainframe data, move it somewhere, and then run an application off the platform that goes through the data and pushes it to the target database you want. Of course, that's, now I'm going through that data multiple times. And of course, that's going to be slow to do that kind of thing. In our case, we connect to, let's say Oracle. We push all the records in a super efficient bulk update form, and you're done with it. Just to put a number to it, in our really small test environment, and we run the smallest mainframe that's possible to run. In fact, we don't even run a small mainframe. We run an IBM ZPDT system, which is a mainframe running on basically a Linux PC. And in that emulated mode, going to nothing more than a free tier at Amazon with nothing more than consumer grade gigabit Ethernet connection, we get somewhere between 6 and 10,000 rows per second throughput to the targets we connect to. That's a Postgres number, but all of those other 5 that I mentioned are pretty similar to that. We imagine in a big heavy duty environment, especially if you were maybe going to an on-prem database, you should have no trouble at all doing 10 times that throughput. And then finally, the way we've architected PropelZ, it's all zip eligible workload. Many customers will tell us that they run so much ETL, it pushes the software meter higher, drives their cost up, not just of the ETL software they're using, but everything on the mainframe, because they're using so much capacity for ETL jobs. Because PropelZ is zip enabled, any MIPS that we use, execute on zip engines, and they, don't have that side effect of driving your whole environment to be more expensive. So, not just savings on the software, but savings on the operational cost of running the software, and that can be really, really significant if you're doing lots and lots of ETL processing. Good. So, Dusty, what I miss? Anything I should touch on?
No, I was just gonna, it's, that point about kind of fitting the right solution to the right problem, right? Vince, I was having a conversation with one of our partners the other day, and they just, what they're seeing is stuff that's really, really over architected, which is validation for the conversation we were having very recently with that customer. They're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, on commercial products, maybe even millions on commercial products, plus operating it, and doesn't even really work. And they can have a much more simple, elegant solution that meets their needs really completely because of the approach that we take. So, I just it's interesting how that's being validated, and that partner was going back to several of its customers to just say, let's take a step back, right? You've gone down this path. You're spending a lot of time and money on it, and you're not getting to the results that you need. So yeah, it's just a really good validation.
Well, and
Um,
let me just
yeah,
try to make that a little bit more concrete. If you are doing the kind of thing where you update a record on a let's say a mainframe VSAM file, and by the time that update is complete, you need a guarantee that a corresponding row in a, let's say a Oracle database has been committed and saved and changed, and all of that work is done with complete transactional integrity and all of that, then a more complicated architecture is probably called for. If you're going to rely on that, and maybe you have transactions that are getting data from Oracle and mainframe at the same time, and you need to guarantee that they're synchronized within with full transactional integrity, then that change data capture approach you're describing is sensible. You're going to pay a high price for it because of those requirements, but that's not what a lot of customers are trying to do. A lot of customers are trying to get this data somewhere so they can do, reporting or BI generally, or analytics, or some type of AI thing over that data. It's basically a read-only approach. If it's out of sync with the mainframe data by a few seconds, that doesn't really impact anything. I mean, these are, as you said, it's the right tool for the right reason. If you're in that category of, geez, I just want to get my data into, MySQL so I can feed it into Tableau and do some pretty charts and graphs and, this, that, and the other thing. No reason in the world to pay for all the overhead of that complex infrastructure when you can use a tool like PropelZ for that.
yeah. Well, the next slide is going to be fairly anticlimactic because I mean, Snowflake is just another target for us. Vince, we do ship the Snowflake driver with PropelZ, right? So that is a um, tested, validated, optimized driver for PropelZ that sits on the mainframe.
Yep.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if there's much else to say, but it's just another target in
Yeah.
particular for PropelZ.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, we can, as I mentioned earlier, we can talk to just about any database that has a JDBC interface to it. Uh, Snowflake falls into that category of certified databases that we've tested and configured. There are really two parts to supporting any new database. One part is the JDBC driver, and we use what we think are industry best for JDBC from a performance and stability and capability point of view. But technically, you can use any JDBC driver you like that knows how to connect to whatever target you want to go to. The second thing is there's configuration data for the target, specific to the target, that tells us, just as an example, what do you want to structure your tables like? What data types do you want to use? If that's a text field, what data type that your database supports do you want to map that to in the tables we create? So we leave that totally open ended. Those are just text configuration files that you're free to modify. So if you don't like the way we're doing let's say indexing your data as we're creating it, you're free to do whatever you like to do. So, we provide something that's workable and that, we think is appropriate out of the box. But, some people might look at it and say, in these tables I create, like a common idea is maybe I want to add an extra column or two when I create those tables, and I want to come back later and populate that with some different information from a different source. Absolutely, you can do that sort of thing. So yeah, Snowflake. I mean, a lot of folks you want to use things like Snowflake's, for instance, their Copilot application, the AI application that basically lets you ask questions of your data. And again, the trick there in my mind is getting the data into Snowflake quick and easy, so you can get value out of that tool. If I'm in that approach where I'm dependent on somebody to write custom code and it's going to take 6 weeks to get it done, and yeah, I mean the value of a lot of these tools is greatly diminished. If I can pick up PropelZ and do that with virtually any of my mainframe data, then suddenly I can get a lot of value out of those tools that it's not just Snowflake and others provide without having to do all of that work. And let me even go a step further. I mean, there are a few different use cases for PropelZ. Certainly what I described before about incremental processing and something that's scheduled and running every few minutes or once an hour. I mean, that's kind of a production, IT operations use of PropelZ. But it's a simple enough tool that a kind of semi-technical business user can be productive with it. It can be run right from the command line. Here's the input, here's the output, here's some credentials, basic options, that kind of stuff. And 5 minutes later, you have your mainframe data sitting in Snowflake or whatever target you want. So there is that kind of ad hoc use case too, where it's I need this now, and I'm going to empower my users to do some of that on their own. Fully supports mainframe security. So if I'm an end user and you give me the ability to run PropelZ, doesn't mean you're giving me access to anything I couldn't already access. It's you lose no control over that. You just let me be productive without having to go through that kind of whole cycle that might otherwise have to happen there. So a lot of value, a lot very quickly is the idea here.
Yeah, Vince, I wanted to ask about that because I know that's come up a couple times. So if you wanted to redact or mask a particular field, is that something you can do in with PropelZ?
Yeah, I mentioned the metadata that we work with that tells us what the structure of the file is. It's certainly possible to just define those metadata fields differently. So instead of including every last field in the file, you might include just a couple of them. And then when we run, that's what you'll see on the target. You'll see a table that just has the fields that you defined on it. So yeah, you can suppress some fields. You can, really do whatever you like there. And of course, the stuff that I'm describing is kind of case by case. So if I have 10 different users executing PropelZ, or some running in that kind of production workflow that I described, and some being run by end users, they can all do different things. So my table that I'm going to work with might have different content than someone else's table. And in fact, that's the beauty of PropelZ. I might, we hear this a lot too. It's like, what target do you want to go to? Well, I've got some Oracle, and then I've got some, Postgres, and then I've got some Snowflake. And, so it's one tool that can work with all of that. And it's not just that it can work with all of that, it can also give you, tailored results depending on what you're going to, what the target is.
Vince, we can duplex or multiplex to multiple targets simultaneously as well. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's true as well. If they're all formatted the same, I want this data in Snowflake and Oracle, we can do that. If they're different, I want these fields in this table and these fields in this other table in a different database, then you would just run it multiple times. It's lightweight enough to do that sort of thing. And I'll mention also, you can also do filtering on the records. So it's not just give me everything in the data set. I might have, it's pretty common. You might have, let's say a record type in that file someplace. So I could say, just give me the record types equal to, whatever value you want. And you'll just get a subset of your data that way too. So, complete flexibility that way.
Right. So let me just talk a little bit about how we license and price PropelZ. It is truly for a single enterprise, it's $50,000 a year. And that includes the 5 drivers that we bundle that Vince mentioned. If it is completely BYOD, bring your own driver. But if you want us to test, configure, optimize a particular driver for you, we're happy to do that. It's a small upcharge, 5 to 10,000, depending on the driver. So it's not a huge amount of money to do that, but you will get the best performing driver you can on the market going through that process. There's no data limits, no install limits. You can run as many instances as you want. No CPUs, sysplex, anything. It's truly unlimited for that particular enterprise. So it's very cost effective, especially when you're talking about um, some of the alternatives or maintaining your own. Just the time to value, right? Getting this up and running, and we haven't really talked a lot about that, but you know most most partners and customers that are working with PropelZ have installed it within an hour, getting time to value, within the same couple hours within the day. And that just is a pretty different experience from what we've seen with, solutions that they've implemented or coming from. So, um, pretty compelling business use case. So Vince, I want to talk just really briefly about what if the customer wants even more control to a particular, um, more discrete, actually data element by data element? That's where Lozen comes in, right? Can you just talk really briefly about how that could work if it needed to?
Yeah, Lozen is our product that enables you to, keep your data on the mainframe, where it's nice and secure and managed well, and all the other things the mainframe is really good at, but access it in sophisticated ways from really anywhere, anywhere with a network connection to your mainframe. So there's a few differences. I mean, I describe PropelZ as basically a replication product. You're taking a copy of your mainframe data and putting it in a database target in rows and columns. Lozen doesn't do that. In Lozen, the data stays where it is. And one of the reasons that's important is it makes it really easy to not just have read access to it, but also to have update access to it. So, Lozen would allow us to write a transaction that lives really anywhere. It could be in the cloud, could be on-prem on another platform, really anywhere you want. And then connect to the mainframe, read a particular record, and either that's it or update that record if that's what I needed to do. So it's full read write access that way. It provides the data integrity that I talked about before. So if I have a mainframe application, let's say a Kix transaction that's trying to bang away and update that same data, there's full integrity there. So my application running out in the Amazon cloud could use Lozen to get to that same file, read a record, write a record, whatever it needs to do with, full integrity, even though that same file is being updated from, let's say CICS in my example here. The other big difference between Lozen and what PropelZ does is, PropelZ kind of, implicit in what we described, that the way you're going to access that data on the target is going to be through, the query language that your database supports. So SQL or, whatever that target database supports. In Lozen, that's not the case. In Lozen, it's a file system based approach. So, if you got, let's say we have a COBOL program that's running on the mainframe, it's typically doing, open, close, read, write to get to its, VSAM data. If we take that COBOL program and move it to the cloud, probably the last thing I want to do is think about, geez, now I've got to rewrite all of that IO logic to do SQL queries. With Lozen, you don't have that. You have all of the same capabilities of things like mainframe VSAM that you would have if that application were running natively on ZOS. So if your COBOL program needs to open that file, search for a particular record by its key, read that, or rewrite it in place, it just continues to do that because all of those capabilities are available through Lozen. And because there's only one copy of the data, you don't have synchronization issues like that change data capture approach we talked about earlier, where a lot of what that problem gets to be is, how do I keep two different things in sync, especially if there are network outages or application outages or other sorts of problems along the way. In this case, it's only one copy of the data, and everybody is sharing it, so it makes a lot of those problems much, much, much simpler. Like PropelZ, Zip is Zip enabled, so it keeps the cost low of what we're talking about, and a little bit different than PropelZ. Instead of it's using that same data transformation engine underneath, but in PropelZ, we typically use that to get to rows and columns in a database table. Here, we give you, the option of, do I want to see my data presented as XML or JSON or CSV, or, if you want it in raw format, bit for bit, what it is on that, let's say mainframe VSAM file, you can certainly do that as well. So a lot of, similar technology, but because one is database query and the other is open, close, read, write, file system mechanics, the interface is a little bit different there. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking to write distributed transactions that rely on mainframe data, Lozen is the way to do that, and in real time, where there isn't replicas of data going back and forth, or there's no need to move entire data sets around, have multiple copies around your network. It's just if your transaction just needs a handful of records, that's what you get. And from a performance point of view, nothing could be better than that. So yeah, that again, as Dusty, I think you put it perfectly right. The right tool for the job if you're looking to migrate mainframe applications elsewhere, or write net new applications that need to ingest mainframe data using file system approaches, Lozen is the right answer for that.
Thanks, Vince. All right, I'll pause here for questions. You raise your hand and I can unmute, or drop them in the chat. And so Vince, I do actually have a couple other questions to start us off, though. I know specifically we've been asked about, hey, can you do IMS or DB2 specifically to Snowflake? Is that something that we can do?
Yeah, so to talk about PropelZ in that use case, I mentioned before that we were structured with an input phase, a transformation phase, and an output phase. The input phase, as I said, could be anything. So if you have, let's say I don't know, report writer, application that you've written already, or whatever it is, a utility somehow that knows how to connect to something like IMS and read data, you can absolutely pipe those records directly into PropelZ, and we'll do our normal thing with them. They'll end up in Snowflake in your example, but they would just, once they're piped into PropelZ, they would just follow that path. The input doesn't have to be file based in that sense. It can be just about anything you like it to be.
Hey, we have a question from Ram. Let me see if I can. All right. All right, Ram, if you unmute, I think you can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks, Ram.
Yes, thank you very much. Just curious, is PropelZ replacing the conventional ETL tool like Informatica or SaaS ETL tool or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it absolutely could. I mean, certainly we'd want to work with you and do a deeper dive on exactly what features, exactly what are you dependent on, and just make sure that everything is there. But it seems to us that most of the kind of routine features that you see being used in the products like the ones you mentioned are available in PropelZ. So not only could you save the cost of the software license there, because PropelZ is top to bottom zip enabled, you would save a lot of processing cost on your mainframe as well. That might be a really compelling thing to do. I think the question really would become, what do you do with the existing stuff that you've already developed? Is that something you try to carry over and use PropelZ for? Would you keep using whatever your legacy ETL product is there and just do new things in PropelZ? That's definitely something we'd be happy to work with you to figure out.
And I think we have.
Go ahead,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, Ram, I'll just supplement and then, feel free for your follow-up. So I think we see it in both cases, right? Where, they don't need really the full Informatica platform, right? And so it can be really a one-for-one replacement. In other cases, it's really a supplement. So PropelZ becomes really because Informatica can aggregate and bring data in from a lot of different sources, but PropelZ is really optimized for the mainframe piece of it. So using PropelZ for the mainframe data sourcing into the other parts of Informatica that they may be using, get those cost savings and efficiencies that we've kind of talked about here, but then use Informatica more downstream for some of their other things. Vince, we should maybe even just quickly mention too that we're talking about allowing PropelZ to work for other non-mainframe data sources as well. So that would expand its reach beyond, just mainframe data too. So becoming more of a one-to-one replacement for, some of those other data aggregator products on the market. So Ram, did you have a follow-up as well?
Yes. As you just mentioned, PropelZ works very efficiently with this mainframe as a source, or it can work with any data source, any database as a source.
Yeah, Vince, you want to talk a little bit about what we're talking about there?
Yeah, I mean, so the input is totally open-ended that way. It can be anywhere that's possible to connect to. So if you have let's say a script, or even something that reaches out across your network to another platform, pulls data in, we can work with that. That's generally all we need for ingesting data, and we don't care where that data comes from. Out of the box, I mean, I mentioned things like VSAM files and that kind of stuff. We also have kind of built-in support for anything that can kind of work in a file transfer mode. So instead of a data set name, you can give us something that looks a lot like a URL. And we'll go fetch the data from that URL, which typically that's going to be like an FTP or something like that. And then we'll use that as our input source. That works as well. And if there are others beyond that, talk to us. We feel pretty confident that what we built is generic enough that we can adapt it to just about anything. So if we wanted to go to some other source that we, for whatever reason, can get to today, we're happy to figure out a way to do that.
So PropelZ only works with VSAM files, or it can talk to DB2 as well?
Yeah, so DB2 would be like Dusty's example of IMS. You'd run essentially a DB2 query. The results of the query would come through PropelZ.
Yeah, it's broader. Was that the use case you were thinking of, Ram, or is there some other one?
No, just curious. It's possible that could be one of the use cases. Can I ask one or two more, if you don't mind, or if somebody else has, I'll leave the platform to them.
No, we'll take as many questions as there are. Let me answer this other one, and then I'll come right back to you, Ram, because there's a question about pricing. I did address that. So pricing for PropelZ and our just across the board, we're completely transparent and public about our pricing. So that's a little unique for a mainframe software company. But PropelZ is unlimited use, $50,000 a year. And there's actually a lot of other use cases for PropelZ. It's an extremely powerful and flexible tool. And you can kind of check out some of those solutions on our website. We have other webinars on those. But again, it's, the customer is not going to pay more than $50,000 a year, all in, no limits. And that includes the 5 drivers that we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. If there's another driver you want us to certify, validate, that's a small upcharge, $5,000 to $10,000. So nothing huge, but we'll be glad to do that if you don't want to bring and configure your own JDBC driver. Great, Ram. Back to you. What's your next question?
Does PropelZ sit in the source platform or target platform, or it's independent of source and that target?
Yeah, so it's completely mainframe based. There's no code whatsoever on the target. So
it can only. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you just have an executable that runs natively on ZOS, and it does everything it needs to do from there.
So mainly it's a mainframe product. It works on mainframe.
Yeah, today with the footnote of what Dusty mentioned, that we as a roadmap item, we're certainly looking at essentially giving you PropelZ that you could run wherever you want to run it. If you wanted to run it on Windows or Linux or wherever else you want, you'd be able to do that. We haven't, to be clear, we haven't done that yet, but we've heard the need for that. So if that's a requirement, again, let us know. We'd be happy to work with you on that.
Ron, is that something you'd want to talk about offline?
Yeah, we can get in touch. Today you'll be busy, but I'll try to get in touch with you later on.
Yeah, like Vince said, that's in our roadmap. So if that's something important, we'd be glad to talk about accelerating that, because we're hearing that request more and more. Just they like PropelZ, they just wanted to, operate on, additional platforms.
Yeah, one last silly question. Does Bill Inman has got anything to do with Snowflake's product?
I didn't quite catch that. Say that again.
Bill Inman is known to be the father of data warehouse. Have you heard of Bill Inman? Or Kimball? Yeah. Rolf Kimball?
Yeah, no, nothing to do with what we're doing, at least today.
Okay. Snowflake is the data warehouse model. Is a highly relational.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You work with only relational tables, or you work also with flat tables, flat data
Well,
frameworks?
so our approach is really anything that has a JDBC style interface. For instance, MongoDB, you can work with Mongo, which is generally, people think of it as a NoSQL kind of database. We're just as comfortable there as anything else. Some some other kind of creative uses that we've talked through are things like using there are a few kind of flat file to relational layers out there. Oracle has a product like that. I mean, they're a bunch of open source in that space. We can work with that as well. And then we see it as a JDBC connection, but ultimately what you're doing is writing to some other type of object in maybe an object store or whatever it happens to be. So again, lots of flexibility there. If you really need it, that final stage that I talked about doesn't technically have to be JDBC. So as an example of that, if maybe what you want to do isn't so much update a record in a database. Maybe what you want to do is launch a transaction when there's an update. So, in that case, you absolutely don't have to use our JDBC layer. You can plug in, whatever you want. And this could be as simple as a script with a bunch of curl commands to, let's say, call a web API or, whatever you need it to be that way. That's the intention there. An example use case of that, some folks, I mentioned before that we can work with like SMF data or console messages coming from your ZOS system. One of the examples we've walked through is the idea of taking like the console message and putting it in one of these open source log aggregation systems that are used to taking syslog data from Linux and Windows and other platforms. Wouldn't it be cool to push your mainframe traffic into that, basically for free with no software that you have to install on your mainframe other than PropelZ? So we can do that kind of thing too, and that's generally done by as I said, we would have that final stage instead of JDBC. It would be an API-driven kind of a thing. You plug whatever you like in there.
Means the data transformation happens on the source side, or it looks like that, or the target side. For example, from number to string. Where does it happen?
So the way that works is it's really a little bit of each. So the way that normally works is that we're going to understand the data. Let's say we have a VSAM record with some text and some packed decimal, for instance. We have metadata that describes that to us. So text for whatever length. Here's the name of the field, all of that stuff. That part is happening on the mainframe because that's where the data is, and that's how we understand it. Now, there's a second part here where, depending on the database you're going to, you might store that text data, just as normal mainframe, EBCDIC code page and so forth. Or you might want to transform it to, let's say Unicode or, some other format. That's done inside the database. So, and the way that's controlled is that, some of the configuration data that I described tells us what data types that the database supports that you want to use. So, let's say we're doing that same processing I described. We see it's, we need a text column and a packed decimal column. We'll go look up what you want to use for those types of data and say, okay, we've got to create a table in that target with whatever you ask for, UTF-8 or whatever it is, and a packed decimal field. And again, you might decide to use a decimal data type, or you might decide to use, whatever makes sense to you for your application. And then, so we'll talk over that connection in the kind of built-in formats that JDBC supports. And then when that gets to the target database, the database will say, okay, I'm trying to store this in this type of field within the database, and it'll do its normal transformation, there. So you get some flexibility on that. And of course, in a complicated case, you might have triggers, you might have all sorts of things going on inside the database in that case. So, you could do, you could envision that, enriching that data, adding data from other sources, whatever you need to do, just by doing kind of normal database things. So it's really a balance between the two is, what I would suggest.
Thank you very much, Vince. You answered all my questions.
Very good. No, thank you. These are good questions.
Thank you. I don't have any.
Okay.
I'm just looking at one in the chat. Have we implemented any state government? If so, we provide a reference. We have some early stage government. Most of those are federal, I believe, versus state. But yeah, we do have government experience. We're also authorized through Carasoft to be procured that way. But we're happy to kind of talk about kind of reference and consulting on particular solution types. It looks like we're getting another typed question here. I'll just pause. I mean, one of the things that government does really like about our solutions is, kind of the fidelity to mainframe security in particular. And I'll toot Vince's horn here a little bit. For those that don't know Vince is actually the original author of Top Secret that was acquired by CA back in the 80s. And so I know that's near and dear to Vince's heart and everything we do.
Well, and it's more than, I mean, it is near and dear to my heart, but it's also one of the significant mainframe advantages. Everybody who is on a mainframe today is probably sensitive to security and has probably spent a lot of time and money implementing security policies and everything else. We see it as we want to live within that, so that it's not like, oh, I'm going to bring this software in and, oh my God, I got to do this big security evaluation. It's just, you have access to what you currently have access to, no more, no less, whether you go through PropelZ or Lozen or, really any of our products that way.
Okay. All right. There's no more questions. Yeah, Ram, we'll be glad to catch up with you offline as well. And it looks like we've got another follow-up here. I was going to just mention, this is actually a short list. This is more of a solutions-based approach. We've been focusing on kind of different use cases of PropelZ. There are some in here as well that I mentioned. So PropelZ can do mainframe to tape migration, tape to cloud migration. And so that's kind of an interesting one. And I think, Vince, you also mentioned like the unified access to mainframe data and how we do that. I would encourage you to go check out that webinar if that's something that's interested you. We do have a page on our website that's just solutions based. So if you have a particular problem or challenge, you can just start there and then it'll kind of lead you to how we approach those problems and how we solve those with one, or actually in some cases you have different options of our products depending on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. VirtualZcomputing.com. We're fairly prolific on our blog, our webinars, demos. So there's a lot of good resources out there that are pretty easy to access. So just go to our website. If you want to reach out to us as well, you can do that at hello@virtualzcomputing.com, or I know I just put Vince and my email addresses in the chat here as well. So just feel free to reach out to us. We'd be glad to just have a briefing or a deeper discussion. We love these discussions, and we're here to help. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince and Dustin. It was interesting. Thanks.
Thanks, Ram. Bye.
Hey, guys.